Check. Ooh, check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Chili's wants to know, when was the last time you had a great lunch?
When was the last time you had a great lunch?
Oh, and we're singing too.
We go way back, baby, back with our singing.
Yeah, we do, but lunch is our thing too.
We've got 10 lunches for just $7.
Burgers, quesadillas, just $7 for lunch.
Just $7 for 10 awesome lunches.
It's even better when you say it that way.
It's pretty much the same thing, but I flipped it. Chili's is back, baby, back.
with school groups a lot. Um,
Good morning, everybody. Look at that, look at that. 9:58, 9:15 and, 9:16 and 5 seconds. So I apologize for being a minute and 5 seconds over when we said we would start. How are you? Welcome. I'm so well. Thank you so much for asking. Do you know why I'm so well? Because I'm here in the Museum of the City of New York at 9:16 and 21 seconds on a Saturday morning in a room full of teachers. So, I mean, round of applause for all of you. Were any of you here at our first Future City Lab on February 3rd? Raise your hand. Welcome back to all of you. How many of you are planning on coming to our last one on April 15th? I'll see you then. And note to myself, when I say that it's starting at 8:30, I should just sleep over here because you all really show up. So I wanted to give a very warm welcome to those of you that are joining us for your second, third, fifth, 500 millionth time, Terry. Is this anybody's first time in the Museum of the City of New York? My friends, welcome to your new favorite museum. You're welcome. So what I want to do is I want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're doing today, and then tell you about some new opportunities that are coming up in our near future. I also want to take a moment to think about what we are doing specifically here today. So just as a little bit of a welcome, I want to ask you, how many of you this morning got up, stretched, yawned, and then went into your farm in your backyard, picked your produce, brought it into your kitchen, whipped up a little something special, maybe stretched again, and then enjoyed it? Please raise your hand if this was your experience. Just keep lying, right? Now, the thing that's interesting, though, is if that I would have had the opportunity to welcome a group of teachers about 400 years ago, and I had asked them this question, they probably would have raised their hands, right? And so what we're doing now is we are going to spend the day thinking about where our food comes from. Where is our nature? What does nature look like, feel like, sound like, smell like in New York City in the 21st century? And why should we be thinking about this? And how we can bring this conversation to our students, to have all of us take a step back and think, that was a really good bagel. I enjoyed that bagel. It was some great cream cheese. Where did that come from? Right? Where did that wheat come from? Whose hands touched this? Maybe you don't want to think about that because then that gets us all a little like heebie-jeebie, right? Like my hands and nobody else. So what we want to do is through a variety of ways today, we are going to think about New York City, and we're going to think about history. We're going to think about the present, and we're going to think about the future, all through the lens of nature. And we're going to think about it from the moment we wake up till the time we go to sleep. All of the ways that we encounter produce, the environment, our natural resources in ways that maybe in the 21st century we're disconnected from or forget to think about. And we're going to bring that to life for our students. Does that sound like a plan? So those of you that were with us in March, February, this is March. Great. Those of you that were with us in February, we also thought about New York City history. We thought about it through the perspective of art and culture and fashion. Many of us remember our model from the day. How are you doing, my friend? You look great. Do you have an agent yet? No? Okay. You should get on that. Where we had the opportunity to meet a New Yorker who has a studio, who takes inspiration from everything that was around him. Epperson got up here and talked about his story and what he was doing, right? We then had tours of the galleries, thinking form and function. Where do we see art and culture and fashion? And then we're able to split up into workshops and really get our hands on things. So we're going to do the same thing today, where we're going to meet a New Yorker who's taking inspiration from what's around her and has a fascinating story to tell us. Then we're going to break up into tours, and we're going to go through the galleries to find evidence of nature in our history, in our present, and our future. You're going to go off. You're going to find nature in your lunch. That was good, right? It was terrible. I will stop. And then you're going to come back, and you're going to go directly into your workshop rooms. So let's just take a moment to think, to go over the agenda. Here you are. You registered. You had coffee. I am giving you your welcome and your overview. In just a few minutes, we're going to have our keynote address called A Fish Grows in Brooklyn. I thought of that title. It was good, right? Then we're going to have our exhibition tours. You're going to have lunch on your own. I'm totally repeating myself from what I just said. And then you're going to go directly into your room. So if you have a green, title on your agendas, you're going to go into classroom 1. That's just down the hallway. If you have a red note for engineering, you're going to go in classroom 2. That too is down the hallway. If you are purple, you are going to the Future City Lab, which is you're going to come back right here. At the end of the day, your workshop leaders are going to hand you the CTLE forms. For those of you that were with us last time, I'm going to just repeat what we did. For those of you that are here for the first time, I'm going to explain how this is going to work. It's super simple. For those of you that were here last time, how simple was it? The simplest. You're going to get 2 CTLE forms. You fill out both, section 1. Just section 1 for both. You keep one. You put it in your special gold CTLE box that's underneath your bed. You give us the other one. We put it in our special gold CTLE box. And that's it. So you get 2 forms. You fill out section 1 in both. You keep one. We keep one. And then you go off to conquer the universe. That happens at the end of the day, at the conclusion of your workshop. All right? Does that make sense? Okay. But I want to get started. And I want to get started in a little bit of a different way than we did last time. I want you to start the day. What makes New York, New York? What makes New York, New York? I want you to turn to the person next to you. I want you to introduce yourself. If you know them, great. If you don't. And I want you to ask the person next to you, what makes New York, New York? You have 2 minutes to figure this out. All right. So, my friends, who has an answer to the $1 million question? Raise your hand if you think you know. Hi. Can you stand up, please? What's your name? Shamima. Hi, Shamima. Jamima, what makes New York, New York?
For example, it's a diversity. If you see in this room, you can see that. And subway.
Ha! Anything else? That's good. Okay, so here's what we have. Diversity, right? And you said if we look around this room, we can see it right here. So basically we are New York. And then you said, now let's get real. Subways. Did any of you take the subway today on a weekend? Ooh, weekend subway riders, gold star, right? If you're taking the subway on a weekend, you kind of got like give yourself a pep talk and you get on there. Excellent. All right. So I want to come back. We're going to come back to diversity because I'm going to ask a question at the end. All right, who can add on to this? Yeah, stand up, please. Multicultural. Amazing, right? So the fact that we have all of these people, like you said, this diversity coming in, but then everybody brings something so special with them. And it adds on to everything that we experience in the city, right? So it's not just the fact that people come from different backgrounds or different places, but it's what they bring with them. Beautiful. Yeah, can you stand up, please? Good morning. What's your name?
Good morning, Marjorie.
Hi, Marjorie. What makes New York, New York?
Well, a city full of energy, a city that never sleeps,
Ha!
and with great opportunities.
So we have a city full of energy, a city that never sleeps. Sometimes I wish it would sleep a little bit. And it's a city full of opportunities, right? Wonderful. My daughter really, really has bought into the city that never sleeps. Yes, can you stand up, please? What's your name?
Barbara.
Hi, Barbara. Food and entertainment. Barbara, I love your city, right? So we can draw lines to what everything is saying, right? We began with diversity, people coming in from different backgrounds, multicultural, bringing different things with them, place of opportunity. And then where do we, as lucky New Yorkers, get to experience this? Well, maybe it's in the food that we get to eat, right? The fact that there's all these opportunities, the entertainment, the fact that we get to participate in so many of these cultural elements throughout the city. Let's add on to this. We're building a city right now. Who has other ideas of what makes New York, New York? Yes, stand up, please.
New York is a hub of commerce, and in Paris due by the transportation that we have.
Excellent. Wonderful. Remind me of your name.
Jesus.
Hi, Jesus. So you said it's a place of commerce, right? The commercial aspect of the city. I mean, you know, New York is a city of this, right? But then it's also the transportation. The fact that you get to go from point A to point B in ways that bring you there. Gesundheit. Yeah, can you stand up, please? What's your name? Hi. Wow. 800? I didn't even know there were that many in the world. That's so many languages. I have so much to learn. Right? So then I just want to add on to what you said, though, this idea of energy that I believe you said, Marjorie, talked about energy. So how do you know it's an energetic city? Because when you walk down the street, right, all of these words, these languages, these 800 languages are mixing and mingling in the air, and they make their way to us. And that's how we are experiencing the city also, by listening. Wonderful. Yes, can you stand up? Remind me of your name. Hi, nice to see you again. Hi. Wonderful. Right. So you were saying that an example of this is like you have this day in Brooklyn. So what are we doing here? Let's just go out and experience this. Kidding. No, you got to stay. So there's this idea that you have these events you can go to where you can just see the flags that represent the people from the world. And then you can even just go down to places that have a name, right? Like Wall Street. And you can stop and think about the history of the place written up there for you on a street. Excellent. Let's get just a few more ideas. Yes, can you stand up, please? What's your name? Cecilia. Hi, Cecilia. New York is the capital of the world. For a moment, I thought you said New Jersey, and I was like, oh, we're going to have a fight. All right. So New York is the capital of the world. You know, we agree with you here in the Museum of the City of New York, unofficially, of course. Excellent. Yes. What's your name? Alice. So job opportunities. Excellent. So we're taking this idea of like opportunities, the fact that, you know, you might have a passion or an idea or a dream, and hopefully there's something there that's there. Yes. What's your name? Hi, Wahida. Okay. Wonderful. So you're thinking about that. I love what you just said. You just painted a picture for me, the door for immigrants, right? So this idea that the port is a place that opens up and lets people in. We know, of course, that there's difficulty and there's issues, and it's not just as clear as that, but there's this sense, part of the energy of the city and part of the history of the city are in places that we can look at, like the Statue of Liberty, where we have monuments to this idea. Let me get one more. Yes, my friend. Stand up, please. What's your name? Hi. So I don't know if you've heard of this thing called tourists. Right. So the fact that, thank you so much, the fact that there's people who come from all over the world, not just to live here, but to stare at us, right? And to take pictures of us living our lives because we're New Yorkers, right? So my friends, I asked you what makes New York, New York. And the interesting thing is that you just got to be part of a museological conversation because the Museum of the City of New York asked itself this very question, sat around a big wooden table, historians, researchers, archivists, educators, people, and they said, what I imagine on a big whiteboard, what makes New York, New York? And then began to fill up with all of the answers that you gave, the people, the transportation, the buildings, the roads, everything, the monuments, the energy, the languages. And then out of these ideas that you just gave us that made their way onto the whiteboard, the exhibition upstairs that has given us or inspired us to have these days was born. The exhibition New York at its core asked itself as its founding question, what makes New York, New York, right? It's the thing that when you're walking down the street and you see something and you turn to your friend, you're like, that's so New York, right? When your visitors, the tourists, your friends come to visit you from someplace far away, and the first time when they're walking slowly, a New Yorker pushes them, they're like, that was so New York, right? Or like I grew up in Pittsburgh, and when I came home for the first time, my friends were like, you talk so fast, that's so New York. Or the fact that when I go home, I don't wait for the light to change. I sometimes cross when there's a red light. Apparently that is just so New York. But all of these intangible things, right, these moments that we know, our bodies know is just so New York, that thing, right, is what makes New York, New York. And so we are spending our days together trying to answer this question. And we're thinking about it. The first day we thought about the art, cultural, fashion that just makes New York, New York. And today we're thinking about it from a different perspective. We're thinking about it from the perspective of the environment. And now my friend started us off, and you said diversity. And we tend to think of diversity in terms of the people who live in New York, right? But I want you today to think about diversity from a different perspective. Because 400 years ago, 500 years ago, when the Lenape Native Americans were living here, what was their diversity that they had here? The food, right? The animals. What else? Yes. So they had to look for their food. They had to hunt. It was their natural environment. How many different trees, flowers, waterways, birds, animals, seasons. So the diversity that we think about now has been here for thousands and thousands of years and is still here today. So that's what we're going to be thinking about. Now, the other thing that makes New York, New York are the incredible people that are living and working here. and it's my incredible pleasure to introduce you all to our keynote speaker of the day. Now, Yemi Amu is the co-founder of the largest outdoor aquaponic farm in New York, right? Now, you are all like, thank goodness, because I always wanted to know who had the largest aquaponic farm in New York City. And so it's my great pleasure to be able to tell you about that. So in addition to Yemi explaining exactly what an aquaponic farm is and what it's doing in Brooklyn, I also just wanted to let you know that she has facilitated the creation and maintenance of 20 edible spaces in schools and community organizations in New York City. So right away, you're going to begin to think about the fact that our keynote speaker is not just somebody who's doing incredible work in Brooklyn, but she's also somebody who's thinking about students and teachers, because she welcomes students and teachers to her farm. But I want to read a quote that I found of an interview that she gave to really get us thinking. She said, "It's more than just how much food you can grow. It's also the environmental impact. When you have a kid that walks into your farm and is excited to eat the carrot or the kale that is growing, that child is going to grow up to be a policymaker one day to help make change. In short, I farm because I would like fresh food and healthy food to be as accessible as donuts and junk food." And so, my friend, it is my great pleasure to do something really cool, which is to introduce all of you to a Brooklyn farmer. Please welcome Yemi Amu.
Good morning, everyone. This is the most beautiful room I've ever seen. Thank you all for being here. I'm super honored and a little intimidated to be talking to educators. My dad taught in East New York for over 10 years. He was a math teacher. So speaking to a room full of my dad a little bit is intimidating. My grandmother also was an educator, and so was my grandfather, who was a professor. So I grew up with teachers, and I have nothing but respect and honor for teachers. So I'm super excited to be here, and thank you so much for showing up today. Am I in the right place? I am. I'm sorry? Sure, I can do that. All right. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is how, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I knew how this works. As EY mentioned earlier, my name is Yemi Amu, and I am a farmer and educator in New York City. I've been working for over 10 years now as a culinary educator, a health and nutrition educator, and now as an urban farmer. And all of my work has been centered around empowering people who live in urban communities to reconnect with the food that they eat and also with the environment, right? And what does that look like? It's building skills and teaching confidence and showing people and demonstrating that the food you eat is important, and knowing how your food is grown is important, and that you can create delicious, beautiful food for yourself, even in New York City. I've been lucky enough to work with children from kindergarten through 12th grade. How many people are elementary school students, teachers? Oh, awesome. We're currently in an elementary school right now. How many middle school? Cool. And then high school. All right, so we have a pretty good diverse group of people here. And most of my work, obviously because I live in New York, is based in New York, but I'm very passionate about working in urban communities because I grew up in one. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria. Lagos happens to be the most populous city in Africa. Who's African here? Oh, nice. Where are you from? Sierra Leone. All right, so Sierra Leone is also in Western Africa, correct? Am I wrong? Okay, cool. So Lagos is in West Africa. Population of 21 million people. This little space right here. Grew up in the city of Lagos, inside of the state of Lagos, as you can see, super tiny, with 21 million people. So all I've ever known is living in a city, right? But my experience with food growing up in Nigeria is very different from my experience with food after I moved here. In Nigeria, both in middle school and high school, I learned agricultural science. It was part of our core curriculum. It was a requirement. And as part of that, the school had a garden that all the students participated in. So we grew vegetables, we raised chickens, and we raised rabbits. And what that taught me at that age is that the outdoors can be your classroom. You can be outdoors and you can learn science, you can learn about caring for animals, you can interact with nature, you can learn self-discipline, right? And you can also learn delayed gratification. Because once you put that seed in the ground, you have to wait a while for you to be able to get anything out of it. And then on top of that, I was always surrounded by fresh whole foods, right? My mom would cook fresh food at home, whole foods at home, and then I would go to school and I would have the same. So it was natural for me to eat fresh food. No one ever had to convince me to eat a vegetable or fruit because it was there all the time and it was delicious. It was also harder to get junk food because when I was growing up in Nigeria, it's pretty different now, but when I was growing up in Nigeria at the time, I would have to save my allowance for several weeks, at least about 4 weeks, in order to be able to buy a chocolate bar or potato chips, right? So if I wanted a snack, my only option would be a fruit or peanuts or, a roasted plantain or something like that. Now, after I moved to New York City for college at 16, that experience was so different, right? The first thing I did was just become a junk food junkie. I could not help it. The idea that junk food was everywhere, it was unbelievable to me. I was in and out of the bodega constantly. My dad and I would go get gas because we moved here together, and I was going to the store and there'd be candy there. We would go to Home Depot and there'd be junk food. It was just everywhere, and I couldn't resist it. But the thing that brought me back is that I missed home. I missed home so much. And one of the things that connected me to home and that childhood was eating whole foods, eating fresh foods, having rice and beans with vegetables and eating fruit. My mom and I used to, on Saturday mornings, we would sit and eat a papaya together. Those memories stay with you. So I started seeking out fresh foods on my own, but I realized it was a lot more difficult to come across. Fruits and vegetables are not easy to come across. You actually have to go out of your way to get them. And when you do get them, typically, at least at that time, in 1996, they were very expensive, and they still are for the most part, and didn't really taste good. Right? And so one of the things I also realized after I moved here is that people did not have the same connection to food that I had grown up with. And the reason they didn't have that connection is because it was too much trouble to get food, right? It was too much trouble to get healthy whole foods. And when you do get it, it doesn't even taste that great. I've eaten so many terrible tasting carrots, so many horrible tasting tomatoes before I started growing food. So my work as a culinary educator and then a nutrition educator was really about reconnecting first to food for me, for myself, to those memories of my childhood that made me not miss home much, and then to be able to share that with people. And urban farming has given me an opportunity, has strengthened my ability to do that in ways that I never imagined. So 5 years ago, I made the decision to start my own urban farming and education company because I had discovered something so cool. I discovered a way of farming that was so cool and so interesting. I knew I had to bring it to New York City, and I wanted to be able to share that with everyone. So I started Oko Farms, and as EY mentioned earlier, sorry, I'm trying to make this work. My next slide. I can't get the slide to work, but in the meantime, I'll keep talking. So I started Oko Farms as really an ecological farm. I started it as I discovered this really cool farming practice where you can grow food in water, right? You can grow fish and vegetables in water, together in water, not separately, not fish tank over here and plant over there, but grow them in this integrated system. And that was really exciting to me. And the fancy name for this way of growing is aquaponics. Sounds fancy, sounds like something somebody would do in a lab coat, but it's actually not. It's a really old system of growing food. Oh, thank you. So, simply put, it's farming on water instead of land. And that's not new. EY mentioned how the natives in New York, she mentioned them earlier and talked about what did diversity look like. Well, diversity looked something like this, right? So this is not necessarily New York City, but this is Mexico. And these are native Aztecs, and this is the way they grew food, right? Aquaponics has been around since about 400 BC, or at least this process of raising vegetables and fish together has been around since 400 BC. This is what it looked like in China. In China, it was a much more complex system because it included ducks and silkworms, catfish. A lot of interesting, more complex things were added, but it's the same thing, as you can see, growing in water. And then a more common practice that I'm sure most people are familiar with is rice cultivation, right? That is sort of like a passive aquaponic system where it's just happening naturally in nature, where you're growing rice is growing in ponds, and you have fish that live in the water. You have fresh fish and freshwater fish and crustaceans. Here is a picture of a paddy field in Indonesia. Pretty cool, right? So they didn't call it aquaponics. They just called it farming. But, you know, we're in New York City. We're modern now. It's nice to have interesting names for things. So why do this, right? Why do this? And how or why would I even bring something like this to New York City? Can we grow rice in New York City? Do we want to grow rice in New York City? Why would we want to grow rice in New York City? And what else could we grow in a system like this? But before I talk about that, I want to talk about how it was even introduced to aquaponics in the first place. About 7 years ago, I was working as a rooftop farm manager at a housing facility for formerly homeless mentally ill adults. And I was working as not just the rooftop farm manager, but also a nutrition educator and a culinary educator. So my work was to support my clients in gaining hands-on skills that would empower them to eat healthier. Many of them were also living with diet-related illnesses like diabetes and heart disease and high blood pressure. And farming actually started in the space on the roof specifically because I wanted to remove barriers to access for my clients. At the time, I was also getting my master's degree in nutrition and health education from Teachers College, Columbia University. And one of the things that would come up all the time as a barrier to healthy eating for a lot of people, it's not lack of knowledge, right? It's just access. Sometimes it's access. Sometimes it's just the skills you need to actually be able to incorporate those healthy foods in your diet or be able to incorporate the healthy lifestyle. And I could not think of a better way than to just make food easy to access for my clients. So I would grow food for the clients and then invite the community to also participate in the process. Because the beautiful things that gardens do and green spaces do in urban environments is create a space that facilitates community engagement. So the neighborhood thought of our client, because they were mentally ill, there was a negative reputation, right, about the clients. But inviting people up on the roof, inviting them to interact with the clients, to work with the clients in the garden really started to shift things for everyone. One of the community members that was working on the roof came to me and said, you know, have you ever thought about doing aquaponics? And my knee-jerk reaction was, what? No, I don't want to do hydroponics. See, I'd heard of hydroponics, and hydroponics is a system very similar to aquaponics where you're growing food in water. But up until that point in my life, everything I knew about farming centered in land, right? Good food comes from good soil. I was taught that as a child, and it was constantly reiterated for me when I started learning how to farm in New York City. So I was not interested in this way of growing, magical way of growing plants in water. It seemed strange and odd, and I wasn't interested. But he pressed on and said, no, I'm not talking about hydroponics. I'm talking about aquaponics. You grow fish and vegetables together using the same water, and you use that water indefinitely, right? You're recycling that water over and over again. And I went, He goes, not only that, think about it. So you're going to be growing vegetables and fish for your clients on a New York City rooftop. Who else is doing that? And I was like, hey, of course I want to do it. I want the street cred for saying that I'm the one that's going to do that. But before I got any further, I really had to learn about what this thing is. Why would I want to do it? Why does it even make sense? Do I need to be raising fish for my clients, right? How many people have eaten any type of meat that was raised in New York City? Grown, bred, raised, harvested in New York City? Right? No, I think me, because I raise my own fish. But other than that, we talk all the time about fresh foods and local food and having food that is locally sourced, right? But it's usually limited to vegetables. Why can't that also be expanded to protein, right? Why not be able to raise fresh, locally grown, sustainable fish in New York City? And that's something that stayed with me for a really long time. So I started thinking, I need to learn more about this aquaponics thing. I need to figure out if it makes sense and how it works, because it still sounds like magic. So I need to figure it out. So this is what I learned. I learned that it is a farming technique that mimics what happens naturally, right? It is a symbiotic system that occurs naturally in the oceans, rivers, and really any natural body of water that covers the surface of the earth, where you have aquatic animals and plants. So it's not something that anybody made up, really. I have this theory in my head that ancient people were like really great citizen scientists, and that they would observe that plants that grew around water or in water did really well. Were always healthy and vigorous, and then started thinking, how do we recreate this with our land plants? And then somebody somewhere said, why don't we just bring our crops to water? Why don't we just grow them directly in water? Let's see if they can grow in water like those plants, right? And it would make perfect sense, because then you don't have to worry about ever watering your plants, because your plants are getting constantly irrigated. And then you can just get fish waste to also fertilize your plants, because at the time, the only fertilizer available to people was natural fertilizer. And where would you as a farmer get natural fertilizer from? It would be from chicken waste or duck waste, or I always say poop when I talk to kids and they giggle, or cow poop or chicken poop, right? So it would make perfect sense that you would also want to fertilize with fish waste, with fish poop. So this is something that people observed, but there's more, right? So what happens in aquaponics and in every natural body of water that covers the earth is that fish produce waste, right? This is something I always do with kids. What are the 3 ways you think fish produce waste? The most obvious one is that they poop, right? What other ways do you think they would produce waste? I hear murmurings, but we do it too. Absolutely, through their gills. So they breathe out in and out through their gills, and that's waste. And one more, we do it too. Yeah, that's the poop, pee, I already said it. Through their gills. Yeah. So their main three ways of producing waste is through their gills, through their pee, because fish do pee, and through their poop. Those are the three ways. And that waste is decomposed by naturally occurring bacteria or microbes, right? The microbes actually feed on that waste. And then they produce, as a byproduct, nitrates, which is plant food. And then plants take up that waste as nutrients to grow. And in a perfectly closed loop environment, like in a river or a pond, the fish also get to eat the plants, right? So it's fish waste is decomposed by bacteria, turned into nutrients or fertilizer really for plants, and then plants take that up, right? So if you think about this, who's ever kept a fish tank? What are one of the things you have to do constantly and regularly? Clean. All right. Who cleans the ocean? Fish? So let's think about this. There's so much. The reason you have to clean out your fish tank regularly is because your fish are producing waste. And that waste is toxic. It's toxic to them. It smells. It's dirty looking. My kids always like to say dirty. It's like cloudy looking. And you have to get rid of it and replace it, right? If you don't get rid of it and replace it, your fish are going to die. Now, when fish are in the ocean, right, and you have these aquatic animals in the ocean that are producing waste constantly, there are billions of them, they're breathing in and out, they're peeing and they're pooping. Who is responsible for changing that water? Yeah, the bacteria and the plants, right? So nature has created this perfect system that doesn't require the ocean emptying out and being refilled magically, right? Or rivers being emptied out and refilled magically, because what happens is this process of aquaponics, where you have bacteria, right, that break down fish waste, and then you have plants who, through their roots, take up that waste that has been converted, and then in turn, you're creating clean water for the fish as a byproduct. Now, what's even cooler about this process is that we often don't think about how much plants or how many plants we have in our natural bodies of water, right? When we think plants, we think trees, we think gardens. When we're talking about cleaning the air, we talk about the importance of having trees, right? The Amazon forest, the rainforest. But most of the earth is covered by water, right? And inside all of these bodies of water, you have plants. Many of them are not visible to the naked eye. They're called phytoplankton. But they do this job all day long, every day, of taking fish waste that has been broken down, taking up fish waste that has been broken down by bacteria. They also do the same thing that every other plant does. What is the one unique thing about plants? And why we need them so much? Photosynthesis, exactly. These guys are also photosynthesizing. They're taking up carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they're using it to make food and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. So without this process of aquaponics, we wouldn't be able to breathe, because this process takes up between 50 to 80% of carbon dioxide in the environment. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty cool, right? That blew me away when I learned about that. So, but what does this have to do with anything? And why would I think to bring aquaponics to New York? And how could I even make aquaponics applicable in an urban environment? So the interesting thing is, when I was, that year that I was introduced to aquaponics, this was in the summertime. Earlier that year in January, I went to Nigeria. I went to Lagos. And one of my neighbors who was running a really successful fish farm, like everyone in the neighborhood but fish from her, was shutting down her fish farm. She was actually doing the fish farm in front of her house, like right in her yard, which was to me super amazing. But she was shutting it down because she said she could not afford the amount of water it took to raise those fish, right? So the same way you would in an aquarium, fish farmers, whether they have, are operating on, 20 acres of land or operating on 1 acre or 2 acres or whatever it is, you're raising those fish, they're accumulating waste, and you have to get rid of that water and put it back. For her, it made no sense. It cost too much because in Lagos, you pay for water and it's pretty expensive. So I started thinking, this is really interesting. She should have just done aquaponics, which would have helped her save on that water. But on a bigger scale, though, the thing that strikes me the most with aquaponics is waste, right? Nature has created this really smart system of taking waste and turning it into food. So you take fish waste, which is food for bacteria, and then bacteria turn it into something that's nutrient for plants, right? And then we either eat those plants or the fish eat the plants, right? Depending on what kind of plant it is. So just that idea of reducing waste, and it was really important to me. So I started doing some research. Just how much waste does aquaculture actually produce? This is a statistic that I got that says, these are fancy words, aquaculture withdrawals. Pretty much how much water is used for aquaculture per day in 2010 was 9.4 billion gallons per day. 9.4 billion gallons of water per day used in aquaculture. It makes no sense. It also makes no sense because aquaculture right now is how most of us get our fish. There's not enough fish in the ocean to support our appetite for fish, right? So scientists are saying that by 2048, we will reach like this brink where there will be nothing left in the ocean except jellyfish, right? So 100% of the fish that we eat will be coming from fish farms. I mean, if that's the number we're using right now to raise fish, that makes no sense at all. And then in traditional soil farming, we use about 70% of fresh water available for human consumption to grow food on land. In the United States, it's about 80%. That's also a lot of water. Who knows how much of the water on the Earth's surface is actually safe for human consumption? How much of it is fresh water? 25? Any other number? It's actually about 3% from what I've read. So it's not a lot. And if we're using almost all of it for agriculture, it doesn't make sense. And we're not just talking about growing fruits and vegetables here. We're also talking about growing corn and soy that is used to feed livestock, chickens, cows, pigs. So it's not a very resourceful way of growing food. And aquaponics uses only about 10% of that water to grow food. And you're not just growing fish, you're also growing plants. Because you're taking the same amount of water that the fish are living in, and you're using that water to also grow food. And because you're using it to grow food, the water is being cleaned for the fish over and over again. So it really made sense that everyone should be doing aquaponics. And I just really wanted to bring that to New York City because nobody else was doing it, and I wanted to bring it. And that's the way Oko Farms was born. just some really quick things for why aquaponics actually is perfect in an urban environment is that most of the soil in New York is actually not safe for growing food in. Most of it is contaminated with lead. So most people who farm in New York bypass the soil, farm and raise beds and purchase soil. So aquaponics gives you an opportunity to just bypass that totally. There's not a lot of space for food production in New York City. So being able to grow both fish and vegetables in the same space makes sense. It promotes ecological fish production. I mean, it just brings fish to New York City. We're talking about diversity, right? So just adding diversity to the things that we can raise or grow to eat in New York City makes a lot of sense. It addresses food security. I've worked a lot with food pantries and grown food for people who don't have access to food for themselves. So it increases food security because you can grow food in small spaces, and you can also give people a locally grown source of protein. And another really cool thing is that aquaponics is scalable. You can do it, it's scalable and portable. So you can do it on a really small scale. You can have a desktop system that you can put in a classroom that makes it more accessible to children. Not every school has a school garden, right? Or has space for a school garden. So if you can put it in a classroom on a desktop and you can teach children about gardening, with a small aquaponics system, it actually makes perfect sense in an urban environment. I always have this conversation with kids when they come to the farm. The first thing I ask them is like, where does food come from? How many of you have had that conversation with your students? What do they say? Thank you. Supermarket. Some kids say the internet. And when I say, okay, before it got to the supermarket and before it got to the internet, where did it come from? They always draw a blank. They just cannot, what? It didn't just magically appear in the supermarket? No, it came from somewhere. So having a small windowsill or desktop system where they can sow seeds and watch plants grow really makes that connection for them. And they don't have to be growing edible fish. They can be growing goldfish or something. But it's the same cycle. Just as an aside, I've been working at a school in the Lower East Side where we put together a small system, and we got on this conversation about what animals eat, right? What do fish eat? What do cows eat? So I mentioned that cows eat grass, and they all were like, what? Cows eat grass? I was a little taken aback. I thought they were pranking me. I said, of course cows eat grass. What do you think cows eat? And one of them was like, cheese and milk. I was like, what? Cheese and milk? She was like, yeah, cows eat cheese and milk. And then another kid next to her was like, oh my God, cows do not eat cheese and milk. I was like, thank you. What do cows eat? She was like, they eat raccoons. This is the value of learning where your food comes from. I was like, I can show you pictures. Cows eat grass. So having that small tabletop system in their classroom, facilitated this conversation so they could think about what animals eat and where animals, how food is grown. So what happens at Oko Farms, right? So I was like, I'm going to bring this super exciting thing to New York City and show everyone. But what do we actually do there? We grow a lot of food, right? Remember when I said I'm the only one here who gets to eat fish because I grow it myself? Well, we invite people to come to the farm and to eat fish with us, and to eat fish that has been raised not just in an urban environment, but in a sustainable way, right? Here are some of the things that we've done so far: prawns, catfish, bluegill, which is a native New York fish. It's actually native from here to, I think, the Midwest. It's a pond fish. We have koi and goldfish because they're a hit with children. Crawfish are also a hit with children. And then we do every vegetable you can imagine. including rice, which we did last year. And this year, I think we're going to add watermelon, which we've never done before. We're going to also do sorghum. Who knows what sorghum is? It's a grain. It's a grain that's native to Africa. You can get the seeds you can pop like popcorn. But what's even cooler about it is that you can make syrup with the stalks. And which we're going to do that and demonstrate that to people on the farm as well. Like we're going to pop the grains and we're going to, I've never made syrup from sorghum. So, I'm going to figure it out with everyone. So that's going to be an interesting, workshop or interesting experience on the farm this year. We also grow flowers because we believe in beautifying the environment. And also they attract pollinators. We attract, maybe 7, 8 different pollinators a year. Am I going the wrong way? When we teach, emphasizing this tactile experience that's about touching and smelling and tasting and listening and just observing with your eyes is so important. I emphasize that a lot because you may not remember the information, but you remember the experience. By the way, that is okra that is okra that the students are touching, and right next to it is the rice. There's a better picture of rice coming. We offer culinary workshops, gardening workshops, and even art-based workshops. These are some kids. I don't remember what game we were playing. I think they were matching plants. We like to inspire budding scientists. So, taking observations there. She was really cute. She just like went off on her own. I wanted to quietly do her observations. I always encourage kids to walk around the farm and make notes of things that they see. Touch things. What does it feel like? Is it rough? Is it smooth? Smell it. Does it smell like anything? If it does, what does it smell like? Taste it. Don't be afraid to taste it. If you're not supposed to taste it, I'll let you know. Sometimes kids actually go beyond like tasting what's in the aquaponic system itself. They start tasting the weeds that are growing directly in the ground. And that's when I'm like, oh no, not those. This is flowers, mint, basil, something called red shiso. That's a chef over there. He made something called a basil burrito. So he stuffed basil in collard greens. And this is a workshop with adults, where actually these adults work with me throughout the season. We planted rice, and learned to harvest rice and also learned to process it. I have so much respect for rice farmers. And then, so what brings people to our farm, unfortunately for me, is not unfortunately, but I'm usually really excited about the vegetables that we grow. It's not as interesting to people. What brings people from all over the world, because we have had school groups that have come from as far as New Jersey. We've had college students that have come from as far as Korea. We had some students from Denmark a few years ago. We have some students coming from China in a few weeks. We've had this woman brought her daughter from Trinidad just to take a workshop on the farm last summer. We've had people from Israel, from Jordan, from Chile, from all over the world, and this is what they're primarily interested in. What do I do to get this to play? Sorry, guys, I'm useless with technology. Oh, man, I thought I would just press play.
No, you just click right on here.
Oh.
Okay, and then it's going to go to YouTube, and then we'll just full screen it.
Okay, I see.
All right, no problem.
So, yeah, perfect. All right. It's not showing up, though. So while we're trying to get the video to work, it's the fish that bring people to the farm. They're our biggest draw. They're the superstar. They're also really my inspiration, right? I spend a lot of time just sitting and watching them and meditating while I'm watching them, because we live in such a hectic world in New York City. We're all go-getters. It's a little aggressive sometimes. We actually the farm is between a tobacco shop and a liquor store, right? So as the kids say, it gets real lit in the neighborhood on a regular basis. So having these guys sitting and watching them is so great, right? This is the favorite part. Hang out. These are the It really is beautiful. Kids want to name them all the time, and then I have to remind them that's so don't get attached. And telling children that this thing that you're looking at that you think is so cute and you want to, which you shouldn't, is going to be food. And then we start having conversations. Well, do you eat? Well, yeah, of course I eat meat. Love meat. Well, do you know meat used to be alive? It used to be a chicken, or it used to be like, a cow. And it starts ticking in their heads. Some of them get really excited and like, ooh, can I come back and eat it? Oh, I will never eat another animal again in my life. Okay. So where are we now? Cool. We get to invite people to the farm. I get to share the best part of growing up in Nigeria, of getting an education in Nigeria. I get to share that with people in New York, right? It's something really beautiful, and I'm speaking now as an immigrant and as a black woman, as an African specifically, where there is something really empowering knowing that I think my country is in one of the shithole list. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's something really empowering about the fact that I can bring something from Nigeria, right? Just this everyday experience that most people have in Nigeria. I can bring it to New York City, and I can empower people with it. There's something really beautiful about that. But apart from that, right, I think the best part of my work so far is being a resource for teachers. I underestimated what that farm space would mean for teachers. When we first started the farm, it was it was like, yeah, we're going to open it up. We're going to show people. We're going to sell food. We're going to be really cool with chefs, and we're going to invite them. And then teachers started reaching out to me. Can we come to your farm? Can I bring my students? And I was like, yeah, of course you can bring your students. But then it became a occurring thing, right? I knew neighborhood people would want to bring their kids. I was like, of course people are going to be excited and bring their kids to the farm that grows fish, and all the kids in the neighborhood come in. But teachers started reaching out to me. We're teaching food justice. Can I bring my kids to your farm? Can you do a workshop around that? We're teaching ecology. Can I bring my students to your farm? We're teaching, all of these different things. The teachers would come to me, or we want a culinary, we want to teach kids about healthy eating. Can we bring students to your farm? And it got me really thinking about what the value of urban farming is in New York City, right? It's not just the fact that we're growing food. Yes, we're growing food and we're getting people to eat food, but we're also a resource. We're teaching people, we're influencing people, we're shaping young minds all of the time, right? That is a value of growing food in New York. When we're thinking about climate change, right? It makes climate change more real. It makes children think about weather patterns more often. It just makes this connection that is so powerful because food connects to everything. And being in a space where food grows is amazing. And it was my teachers that showed me that. We offer farm tours to teachers for this reason. the tours are usually about an hour. The students get to walk around the farm and touch things and look at fish and engage in a hands-on activity. And depending on the age of the students, we actually get to have some really interesting conversations, right? There was a particular day where a student was challenging me about ocean fishing versus farm, aquaculture, and why we should eat fish from the ocean, and why isn't it great? And I had to go back and be like, wow, she's making some really good points there. And then I started talking about how, there's not even enough left, right? And we're talking about pollution in the environment and how, we have all this environmental runoff, some of it from conventional aquaculture that's ending in the ocean. So we got to have this really interesting conversation. We talk about pollinators. We talk about honeybees. Why are, honeybees are becoming extinct, right? But what other types of pollinators do we have? Honeybees are not our only pollinators. What other types of pollinators do you see here? What do they look like? How do we attract more of them into New York City landscape? So we get to have these really interesting conversations. And then I'm really excited because we've actually expanded into schools. So for a year now, we've been doing an aquaponics program in schools that I've been calling the Leave It Better Aquaponics Program, because I don't have a better name for it. Leave It Better is actually an organization that does programming in schools. And what they bring into schools is gardening education along with filmmaking skills, which is really awesome. So when we work with them, the kids learn about ecosystems. They put an aquaponics system together from scratch. They learn about the non-living things in an aquaponics system and the living things in an aquaponics system. They sow seeds. They watch it grow. We harvest, and we have a meal together. But in addition to that, they learn interviewing skills. So they interview each other, and they learn filmmaking. They learn about shots and angles and record each other during the process. And then in June, there's a film screening at the New York Botanic Garden where the students get to watch themselves on screen and to look at their work, which is really amazing. So they're walking around with their own cameras and they're filming each other throughout the entire process. It's really cool. And then we also offer aquaponics garden installations in schools. So they could be as small as a desktop that's inside a classroom, or they could be something a little bigger that's part of the school's school garden. So those are the things that we offer. Let me see if there's anything else I forgot. So we're going to have time for a Q&A at the end because I'm sure you have really cool questions for me. But before that, I just want to show you a little bit of what the farm experience is like. And then it's supposed to play only certain, yeah.
Common to see places like this, or this, but far less common to see this. A fully functioning aquaponics farm, a hybrid between aquaculture, raising fish, and hydroponics, which grows plants without soil.
It's really nice to see people walk through the gate and turn around the corner and see this beautiful space, because it's the last thing that they're expecting.
Oko Farms was co-founded by Yemi Amu, and much like the Yoruba deity it was named after, Oko Farms is dedicated to making healthy food plentiful and accessible to everyone. Lack of access was a problem she encountered while working as a nutritionist. A lot of goods are coming out of the farm. Produce that grows up to 3 times faster than plants grown in soil is frequently sold to local organizations. The fish help sustain the aquaponic system and are also for sale as pets or as food. And the community continues to play an important role in the farm.
We get a lot of people who want to come in. We always tell people, you're always welcome to come in, but you have to come in with a kid. We encourage people to bring their kids in all the time. We work with school groups a lot throughout New York City, even New Jersey.
One of those schools is P373K, the Brooklyn Transition Center in Bushwick. The special needs students learn about plants and farming through hands-on games.
Good job. You know, they're garlic chives. Someone said it smells like garlic. These are specifically garlic chives. Good job. All right, so we're going to...
I don't think she likes that one. But coming to Oco Farms and learning about produce firsthand is vital to students, says Elizabeth Sandoval, a teacher at the school.
I grew up in Bushwick, and I think it's really nice for them to learn about urban farming, so hydroponics and aquaponics being included in that. I think it's important for them to learn about where their food comes from, but also to know that it would be possible for themselves to grow their food, because a lot of times we see food in the supermarket and they're not making the connection between where that food comes from. We learn a lot on the computer, we learn a lot from books, but to actually observe it and see it is so much more important.
19-year-old Isaiah Santiago agrees when he chimes in on his favorite part of the tour.
I liked it, but my favorite part was eating the plants.
The students of Brooklyn Transition Center got to learn about aquaponics today through taste, touch, and smell. But by coming to Oco Farms, they also learned a lesson that was a little less tangible.
For my kids, they might know about urban farming, but they're like, that's not really for me, because they don't see someone who looks like them being an urban farmer. But when they come and see people who look like them being urban farmers, then that's like more inspiring for them to actually do it.
Inspiring.
So we're going to stop there. That video is actually on YouTube, so if you want to watch the whole thing, we can provide the link so that everyone can watch it. So before I wrap up, any questions? Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I don't need the microphone. Thanks. You and me.
I have a question. Do you have plans to stand up though? If you have a question, stand up so the whole room can hear you. Hi, my name is Jesus, and I have a question for you. Do you have plans to expand your program in other boroughs, like in the Bronx, for example?
So we actually work with schools throughout New York City. We have a school in Riverdale right now that we're working with, where we're setting up an aquaponic system. This school is actually cool because they're going to use the aquaponic system as a way to teach compassion for animals. So we do go to schools and we do work in schools. We're working with a school in Lower East Side as well. At the moment, we're going to be working with, I'm terrible with names of schools because they're numbers. So there are 2 schools in Manhattan we'll also be working with in the spring. We also work with nonprofit organizations. We're setting up a system for an organization called Brotherhood Sister Soul that's in West Harlem. So we do try to get around as much as possible. We're also working on getting a bigger space so that we can hold more students, because our space right now is 2,500 square feet. There are only so many people you can hold in the space at once. So we're working on getting an even bigger space so that even if you do have an aquaponic system in your school, you can still come to our site and experience it on a different scale. You had a question?
My name is Ms. Cheney. I am on the committee with the Green Zone. We have a garden called Green Patch on Walton. And one of the things that we do is we grow during the spring and the summer months. How do you maintain the fish during the winter months?
I like that question. Yeah, I like that question because. Repeat it out loud so everybody can hear. So her question was, how do we maintain the fish in the winter months? Because she's a gardener. She's a community gardener herself, a Green Thumb Garden. You guys should come and get her tour. It's free for Green Thumb gardeners. And, farming outdoors, as you know, is limited to the spring, summer, and the fall. And her question was, how do you keep the fish alive? This is a great question because it's a conversation we have all the time. We raise fish that are adapted to this climate. That means that they're able to survive in New York City. So everyone is like, why don't you grow tilapia? You don't have tilapia. Tilapia is the most popularly farmed fish in the world, but we don't raise them because they're tropical fish. They're not adapted for the New York City environment. So we raise things like catfish. We raise things like the bluegill, right? Because they're native to this area as well, and they're adaptable to both the warm weather and the cool weather. We don't grow plants, right? Because it's also a way for us to talk about seasonality and letting the farm rest. And what happens in the winter is the fish actually kind of go to sleep. They're not as active. They stop eating. As soon as the temperature gets to about 50 degrees
My name is Georgette. I would like to ask you like about the greenhouse and aquaponics farm. Was it like we buy all the fruit and vegetable they grow already in greenhouse? What's the difference? Like the greenhouse, I'm talking about the greenhouse. They grow vegetables and fruits. What you said, talking about the aquaponics. What's the difference? Like, what is the more benefits for us?
Oh, so you can do anything in a greenhouse. You can grow in soil in a greenhouse. What a greenhouse allows you to do is just expand your season, right? So if you have a greenhouse, it means you can grow later into the fall, and you can start earlier in the spring, right? That's the advantage of a greenhouse. We don't have a greenhouse. We have a small greenhouse just for the fish, but we don't have a greenhouse covering the entire space. So what greenhouse does is just allow you to, lengthen your season a little bit so you can grow later into the year and start earlier.
Hi, my name is Tommy. I was just wondering, this requires time, organization, administration, and lots of effort. I was just wondering, how do you get your funding?
He went right to it.
The question always comes up. So, I get my funding through education, through people who come to the farm and are interested in learning, right? Who pay for the opportunity. We do all kinds of programming. People pay for tours. We're actually in the process of becoming a nonprofit now so that we can offer our services on a sliding scale. But we offer right now, the tours are $10 for students and they're free for both teachers and any other chaperones. We do adult workshops that people pay for. So all of our funding is from our blood, sweat, and tears. We work really hard to attract people into the space. We also sell produce. We turn our produce into product like teas and syrups and things. So that also brings in money. I partner with chefs a lot. I love to eat. So I partner with chefs a lot, and we throw dinners and we throw events. So we're able to cobble up money in different ways. Another reason why that question is really important is because I'm not any different from any farmer, anywhere, right? Most farmers will tell you whether they're like Brooklyn Grange that's growing on a rooftop farm, or on a rooftop, or someone who's growing on like 200-300 acres. Your income has to come from many different places. It doesn't just come from produce, right? Farmers are always coming up with innovative ways of making their space attractive. I always say what we do is agro-tourism, right? We bring people into the farm, we show them oohs and ahs, and everyone's happy. Whenever you go pick strawberries or pick apples, that's a way of a farmer charging you more for work they should be doing for themselves. Right? It's income generation for them, and it saves on labor. So that's another thing that we talk to children about, where just because you're an urban farmer doesn't make you any different from any other farmer in the country, right? It's hard work, like you said. It's a lot of organization. It's a lot of patience, and it's also risky. Right? Farming is probably one of the most risky businesses in the world, but probably one of the most rewarding as well, because we get to share the fruit of our labor, literally, with everyone.
Don't mind me. Oh, sorry. I don't. Oh my gosh, you just have to tap me as I run around.
Mine is quick. The video stated that you sell to organizations. Do you also sell to the general public, or maybe in the future?
We do sell to the general public. So people in the neighborhood come on and buy stuff. I think the most popular thing for people in the neighborhood is herbs, because you can just buy the amount that you want and use it and then come back. People are also really into the tomatoes that we grow and then come in and buy that. So whenever we have stuff ready, we just have a sign, people come in. When we move into our biggest space, we actually want to have a farmer's market. I'm more interested in engaging the community, really, than selling to retailers or even to chefs, because I think that when you sell to chefs, there's no connection. People are sitting there and they're eating the food, but they're not making those connections as to where the food came from. But if you're walking into a garden that's growing food and you're buying food from there, you're certainly making those connections.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amparo. I would like to ask you how often the farm is open to the public.
So the farm is open to the public from April through November, and open for tours Mondays through Fridays, of course. So if you go on our website, okofarms.com, you can register for a tour.
Who's next?
Oh, okay, so there's another question that says, if you're just an individual and you want to come see, can you see? Or if you want to bring your students, can you come and see? So we prefer to do groups because it's easier on us than taking individuals all day long. It's really hard to do farm work when people are coming in and out and you're talking to them. So we prefer groups. So if you want to come, come with a group.
And I will send out information to everybody about the website, so you'll get that.
Hi, my name is Matthew. Thank you for the great talk. Can you just speak to some of the challenges and limitations of aquaponics?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that question. I want to say that the challenges of aquaponics is not really unique to aquaponics. It's unique to farming in general. But what makes aquaponics a little bit more challenging as a practice than soil farming is that you also have to learn how to raise fish. And you're balancing the needs of fish, plants, and bacteria, which can be challenging, right? Because if all you're doing is raising plants, you can just focus on plants. If all you're doing is raising fish, you can just focus on fish. But you're not just doing that. You have to balance like the needs for the bacteria. If you're not feeding the fish enough, or the fish are not eating enough, if you don't have enough bacteria, and the plants are not growing, so it's this balance you have to need. And another thing is that, honestly, I'm teaching myself to raise fish. There's no one around me that I know that does it. So I'm teaching myself to do it, and that's been the most challenging part for me, is learning. Fish are they are like the last wild, quote unquote, undomesticated animal that we eat. So the domestication of fish, at least in modern practice, is relatively new. People used to do it just in ponds and in open environments. So bringing them into the city and doing them in a contained environment is very new. So I'm teaching myself, and that's been the biggest challenge personally. Aquaponics also requires electricity, because you need electricity to move the water from the fish to the plant. But see, we have about 10,000 gallons of water on the farm that we use, the same body of water that we've had since 2013. And we use one pump that uses maybe about the same amount of energy as 2 light bulbs to move all that water, and the rest of it is gravity. So there are ways that you can, for those who teach physics, this is also really interesting because thinking about ways to move water is also a very interesting way to go. We use the pump just to move the water up to the highest point, and then everything else is gravity. So it minimizes the use of electricity. And doing farming in New York City is very difficult because you're working in such a tiny space.
I'm coming.
When you're moving water around, now I lost my whole train of thought. You're moving the water around, but like, what about the evaporation? Like, and there's like water shortage at certain times of the year. Do you have to add water?
Yeah. And so we don't really experience water shortage because we're outside and it rains a lot, right? So one of the reasons we put the farm outside is because we wanted to make it accessible, but we also wanted to be able to take advantage of rainfall. So we capture rainwater, which falls directly into the system, and the plants actually respond better to it. And yes, we do lose some water through plants taking up water and through evaporation. But we replace maybe 10% of that water once a year. Last year, because it rained so much, we actually had a different problem I had never prepared for. It's funny, I'm always preparing for water scarcity. I never prepared for abundance. Our ponds were overflowing, and I didn't know, I never thought that could happen. So that's another thing we need to think about, like what happens when we get a lot of rain. So yeah, we do lose some, especially in August. July and August are the 2 months where we have to replace about 5 to 10% of the water.
Hi, good morning. My name is Michelle. My question is, do you take interns or volunteers due due to the fact that half of like middle school and high school kids do volunteer services to earn their credits? I just want to find out.
Yeah, so we do not take volunteers, but we take interns. We work for 3 years now. We've been working with City as high school, where we get 2 students a year in the spring and in the fall that do 8 weeks on the farm. So we do take high school students, and we also take college students, but no volunteers. Like it needs to be, you know, if you're there because you're getting something at the end of it, a grade, it's more meaningful to you than just showing up whenever you want to. Kind of throws the structure off. Oh, okay. As long as there's accountability, yes.
So we have time for one more question. So who's, all right. Hi, I'm coming. How are you, everybody? You look great. Wait. I'm coming.
Yes, I just want to know something. Being that I have a fish tank, you do that aquaponic thing. Being that that requires a lot of electricity, right?
Not like I said earlier, using gravity. But yeah, it does require some use of electricity.
I just want to know if there's a power shortage, do you have a backup system? That's what I want to know.
That's a great question. So when I actually lived in Florida for 4 weeks, learning aquaponics, and my aquaculture teacher used to call me New York City. And he'd be like, New York City, what happens if there's electricity shortage? What do you do? And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you're doing this system where you're using electricity. Aquaponics requires electricity. What do you do? I hadn't thought about that, right? He was like, you always have to have backup energy. And you should always also think of a way, physics teacher, of being able to move that water if you need to, right? Without using electricity. So while we were there, we actually got to 4 different farms that use different ways of moving water. But these are outdoor farms. So they were using solar power, which is something we're also going to integrate into our system, and wind power. Just using a wind turbine to move the water, or using solar energy as backup storage for water. We use very little electricity that I don't worry about it so much in terms of the amount of electricity usage, but I constantly worry about what happens if the power goes out for any reason, like weather or who knows. Another thing is, we don't overcrowd our fish tanks. If you go to most fish farms, you're looking at like fish swimming literally. They're not even swimming, they're just piled on top of each other. Most people do half gallons of water, like professional aquaculture farms do half gallons of water per fish. That's a lot of fish. We do about maybe 20 gallons of water per fish. We have a 1,200 gallon tank, and we never have more than 400 fish at a time. That's because if something goes wrong, there's enough water and enough oxygen that my fish can survive. Worst case scenario. Even if the water is not moving, at least my fish won't die. So right now, it's winter, they're chilling, even though we turn the system off because we want to save on electricity. So you can build in ways to do that as a backup. That doesn't cost you any money.
Yummy. Thank you. This was extraordinary. I'm going to guess that for many of us in the room, this was the coolest way to spend a Saturday morning in a long time. And now I'm just going to use the word aquaponic all day. I'm working it into everything. So my friends, what we're going to do now is we're going to take this idea of what makes New York, New York. We're going to take the idea of nature found in unlikely and likely places, and we are going to put on our hiking boots and explore the Museum of the City of New York via our exhibitions. And we are doing this in a very mathematical way, which means we can check off the M for our STEAM day. you're going to watch me do math, and by me, you're going to watch Pilar do math. So here's what's going to happen. You have your 4 intrepid museum guides standing in front of you. I have Marika, EY, Pilar, and Hannah. Oh, they're clappers, everybody. It's the best. So what we're going to do is, nobody move, nobody breathe, because we're going to divide you according to where you're sitting, and you're going to get your guide, and then we're going to sort of dismiss you by the person who's going to the 3rd floor. We'll take you up first. This is we spend hours, days, we have diagrams charting this out in our office. So, okay. Back of the rows. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, including you folks who are by the other wall. The next 3 rows,
1, 2, 3,
are going to go with EY to the 2nd floor. The next 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, are going to be going with Hannah. And the front 4 rows are going to be going with Marika.
But wait, hold on 1 second. We have a great question. What do I do with my coats and bags? So I'm going to tell you something. This is very important. This is part of the diagram, everybody. We are going to be transforming this room into a room with tables and chairs to get it ready for our workshop. So you can leave like your coats here, but the chairs are going to be moved. I would encourage you to take with you what you would like, but if it's too burdensome, you can leave it on a chair, totally, but just know it's going to be moved. So I just gave you a mixed message. So wait. So the first, hold on, wait 1 minute. Teachers following instructions. So the first 3 rows go with Pilar. Everybody is going to wait. Just wait. Let them go. Let them go. This is working beautifully. It's not working at all. This is a disaster.